Today I'm going to tell you a bit about where Experiment came from, what we do, and what we would like to do in the future. So Experiment is an online platform for funding, discovering, and sharing scientific research. We were made by scientists. So our founders, Cindy and Denny, were undergraduates at the University of Washington when they came up with the idea for Experiment. They had a research project they wanted to fund. They needed about $5,000 to test a hypothesis that this therapeutic they had developed for an anthrax could actually be used to treat staphylococcus as well. But when they went to their advisor with this idea, he said basically, we don't give undergrads $5,000 to test a hypothesis that doesn't have a lot of backing to it. So they set out to solve this problem. Where can we get a small amount of money for a research project that can potentially develop bigger results? At Experiment, we also connect researchers with the world. One of the aspects of our platform is that we have a mode for researchers to share their thoughts with the public. These can be results, figures, tables, data, or information about their process, the progress they're making on the project, just ideas that they have. And this is something we're really invested in moving forward. So here are the stats on Experiment as of 2 days ago when I put our talk together. We have so far raised more than $8 million for research. Experiment started in 2012, so we're about 6.5 years old. Those $8 million have been pledged across 1,932 projects. 844 of those projects were fully funded. So that's about a 45% success rate. It's a little bit lower than we make it, I think. Maybe a lot lower. That money was spread across 44,000 different backers. And we actually have 2,700 people who are repeat backers on our site. They come back, they pledge more projects. We actually have one backer who has supported 1,000 projects on the site. Although, to be fair, many of his pledges are like $2. But he's there and he's supporting them. Our 11,000 researchers have published 8,000 lab notes. Those are those little interactive blogs that I was mentioning. And they have actually made 65 peer-reviewed publications as well. There are probably more peer-reviewed publications that came out of Experiment campaigns, but not everyone reports their publications to us once they're out there in the world. We have 21 live projects right now. You are welcome to look, of course. And the average project budget is very similar. It's around $4,000. That's our median. We have a huge range going from $500. We actually raised $1 million for a celebrity project in 2014, I think. So, what do we fund? Experiment funds a little bit of everything. This is a map of our 20 categories, and I'll talk a bit more about this in a minute. But to get on to what we actually fund, we fund some panda bear science. This is a semi-famous internet cat. I don't know if you know her. Her name is Lil Bub. I did not know her before Experiment. She's German. And she's funny looking, in case you couldn't tell. But she has a number of genetic diseases that are not common in cats, but have some relation to genetic diseases seen in humans. So her owners and some research colleagues of theirs were interested in learning about what her genome actually looks like so that they could map these genetic diseases. They raised a little bit more than $8,000, which was above their goal, and they worked with about 250 backers. So one of the things that Lil Bub has, in addition to no teeth, which is the strangest thing I can think of, she has polydactyly, which is basically when you have too many fingers on your hands. So she has an extra set of fingers coming out of her wrist. And polydactyly can be caused by several different mutations. However, Lil Bub's mutation was linked back to a single base pair change at this location. So normal cats have an A here, Lil Bub has a G, one nucleotide gives her 4 extra fingers, right, on the front feet. And that is a mutation that Lil Bub shares with the cats of Ernest Hemingway, who famously had many polydactylous cats on his property because he thought they were adorable. I can only assume that's what he thought. But we don't just do cute furry things, we also do slimy things. And I will admit that there's a lot of bias in this presentation because I studied animal behavior, so I picked animal studies. So in 2017, Stephen Alleyne and Mark Goodman in the UK raised $1,700 to study amphibian chytrid fungus. The chytrid fungus is implicated in the extinction of 70 amphibian species in the last 2 decades, and it's considered a pretty big problem in amphibians, especially in the neotropics. Their study was on the midwife toad in the UK. So this project actually used pattern recognition software to determine whether or not they had sampled from that toad before. So you can see they took these dorsal images of the toads, and this pattern recognition software could individually identify the toads for their sampling. And they could determine if they had if a sample was a recapture or not. What they found is that they actually only recaptured about 3 toads across their first sampling season. So it was only, 3 out of 60 toads had been seen before, which is 5%. This study has resulted in 2 publications so far, which they linked on our site and kindly put up for anyone to download. So here we have a small amount of money, $1,700, giving us 2 peer-reviewed publications and results that otherwise would not be available. The next person who wants to study amphibian chytrid fungus in the UK has a jumping off point, where before they would never have known what the actual chytrid fungus status was in that population. Another thing we do at Experiment is our research challenges. So this is our version of a grant program. What we do is we invite a bunch of researchers to present their research as crowdfunding campaigns, and these researchers are united by a single topic. A good topic is something that's broad enough to get 30 or 40 or 50 researchers interested, because that means that we'll end up with about 15 campaigns running at the same time. But it can't be so narrow that people feel excluded by the research topic. The campaigns all launch on the same day, and partway through the campaign period, we give an additional monetary prize. That monetary prize goes to the campaign, usually with the greatest number of pledges. So if you raise $1,000 with one pledge, that's one pledge. But if you raise $1,000 with 500 pledges, though your pledges are smaller, that's how we measure the additional prize money. These research challenges are great because they stretch what is typically a really small grant, $1,000, $1,500, into 10 research projects with $40,000. And that means that instead of one project getting a small $1,500 grant, $40,000 goes to 10 projects that can all move forward. So one of the really notable research challenges we did was on zoos, right? Going back to kind of panda bear science. And I wish I had a couple more minutes to tell you about the studies that happened in this, because it wasn't all just cute, fuzzy animals. There were some important medical implications in there. But these campaigns raised $43,000 for 10 researchers, and that meant that the $1,500 prize was converted to $43,000, as I mentioned before. We've started to collaborate with scientific associations in order to make these grant challenges more appealing and more interesting. We just ran a Wildlife Disease Association challenge studying how different wildlife diseases can be treated or controlled, population dynamics, etc. And next year we'll be running an entomology challenge and a conservation challenge. So we are working with organizations to help them leverage their small grant funds into large amounts of money. So now you have an idea of kind of our programs, a little bit more about what we actually fund. So biology and ecology are our 2 biggest funding categories right now, followed closely by medicine, which really matches what Mike was saying about the popularity of different topics. We have other categories that are not as large, but we still see some people working for funding in the social sciences. When we break down the people who use experiment by their position in the university, we see that students make up the vast majority. We have graduate students and undergraduate students accounting for, 45% of our users. We also have postdocs and professors working with us, as well as independent researchers, anyone ranging from, we've had some middle school researchers doing their science fair projects with us to, high school teachers or middle school teachers who are running research projects with their classes. There have been some really cool independent research projects. One that recently finished, and they've done a great job of updating and communication, is a team of high school students who developed a water quality detection probe. And they actually made a set of these probes and they put them in their public library so that anyone can go to the library, check out the probe, and then test their water quality at their own home. And this came in light of, I'm not sure if people are familiar with the Flint, Michigan crisis, but we recently discovered in the US that our water quality is a lot worse than we thought it was. So this was something that high school students found a need for, they crowdfunded for it, and they've developed it. When we look at the success of projects on our site, so this is just anyone who starts a campaign. But when we look at success, we see that grad and undergraduate students are way more successful than professors and even postdocs at using the site. So even when you control for the number of campaigns and the amount that they're trying to raise, graduate and undergraduate students do a better job than their professors do. And that's a big question for us. What do grad students know that their professors don't know? What are the grad students doing that those professors won't do? Oh, you can't see the map. Well, the top country that we support is the United States, because we're based out of the US. We're open to supporting all projects in Canada, Australia, the US, and the UK. Projects outside of those countries are welcome to apply, but there are additional conditions. We can only do payment transfers through PayPal, so you need to be able to receive funds through PayPal. Researchers in international countries also need to have a strong outreach program because our messaging can't reach people in other countries as well as it reaches people within the US. So where are we going? At Experiment, we believe that the democratization of science is happening with or without us. And I think, as Dominique and Mike both alluded to, science itself, whether it's good or bad science, is also happening without us. In Canada last year, researchers reconstituted horse parks using supplies that they basically mail ordered, right? And they haven't published on this work, but it was easy, it was cheap, and they could do it. And this was done by a group of Canadian researchers working at a university. But if Canadian researchers can do this now, who's going to be able to do it in 5 years? This is science that's happening whether or not we want it to. And they didn't need much funding for that. This is something that science needs to figure out. We need to figure out where we're going. And Experiment wants to be a part of that. At Experiment, we believe that science needs an efficient and accessible system that values scientific integrity. So, efficiency. Why is efficiency so important to us? The growth of science depends on our ability to transfer ideas from human to human, ideally accurately, ideally quickly, right? We are already seeing evidence of improved efficiency in science. So where once you had to wait for your paper journal to come out 8 months after you sent your submission in, and then it wasn't until the paper came out that the world could see your results, now we are easily documenting results and process with software. We automate repetitive tasks. We outsource experiments to core facilities. And in accessibility on the next slide, as I've said, we have open access publishing, but our funding channels are also getting more important. So, After efficiency, what about accessibility? We need a system that allows humans to discover existing knowledge for free. And this is where crowdfunding and science journalism and communication are inextricably linked. Because if scientists can't communicate their work effectively, well, then there's a problem. So, evidence of accessibility, open access results that are published in real time, right? If you go to a traditional journal, if you go to an open access journal, the minute your work is approved after peer review, it can be online within days, compared to months and months for a traditional journal. With the internet, scientists can now collaborate, and intellectual property can be shared with contributors. But we still have a problem in terms of accessibility. So, this is Albert, and Albert wants to do science. The problem, there are millions of Alberts who aren't being heard. So, Experiment has one solution. We make a platform where anyone can science. But there's still another problem. Albert has results. And there are billions of people who are not hearing Albert's results. This is the crux of our accessibility goal, right? We want anyone to be able to see Albert's results. We don't have a perfect solution to that yet. I hesitate to say that we even have a good solution to it, but it's a problem that we're working on. Investing in accessibility means that science becomes more equitable. As in many realms of our society, there is a big societal gap in who gets to do science and who gets to communicate science. Finally, scientific integrity. Why is integrity important, other than from an ethical standpoint? Without quality and integrity, this whole science system falls apart. And I think we've touched on these issues in communication, right? What is good science? What is bad science? What is good communication? What is bad communication? Unfortunately, we don't have those answers yet. One thing that we need with integrity is for peer review to evolve and thrive in an internet age. From a personal standpoint and from experiment standpoint, it also feels like peer review needs to become more equitable and inclusive. Peer review right now seems to be a very exclusive system. We need accurate metrics that can actually measure scientific impact. What does the impact factor of a journal really mean? What does it mean when you have 100 citations? What does it mean when you have 1,000 citations? We don't necessarily understand these. Scientific integrity is a core value for us at Experiment, and we think that to build an efficient and accessible system that values scientific integrity, science needs everyone's help. Thank you.